In a simpler definition, roguelikes are games where you die again until you finally get a playthrough so good that you can win. Many of the best roguelikes are also among the best games you can play, but the genre has grown to include side-scrollers, deck builders, third-person shooters, platformers, isometric adventures, fighters, rhythm games, RPGs, turn-based games, tactics games, and even horror games. So with so many games, I couldn't help but make this video to show you the best roguelike games. The former PS5 exclusive title has made its way onto PC, introducing the award-winning bullet hell roguelike to a brand new audience. You play as Celine, an astronaut who has crash-landed on a shape-shifting world. Packed to the brim with creepy crawlies and vicious monsters, Celine must do anything she can to survive, including blasting every threat into a million pieces using her arsenal of weapons. The procedural world of Returnal is incredibly punishing, forcing Celine to restart her journey from the very beginning each time she dies. You won't experience the same run a second time, so take advantage of the items at your disposal and do your best to avoid being taken out. Dead Cells accentuates the just one more round philosophy of a great roguelike by empowering you with lightning-fast movement and twitchy combat in a 2D side-scrolling space, making life or death decisions happen in the blink of an eye. Dashing through increasingly hostile biomes and utilizing your ever-expanding arsenal of unlocked weapons and attributes against armies of enemies, all while mastering your platforming reflexes, makes for an incredibly satisfying loop. Throw in some large, devastating bosses and the ability to branch your own custom path through unlocked areas in the order of your choosing, and you have a recipe for near-infinite replayability and customization, creating one of the best games in its class. A delightful blend of bullet hell and roguelike, Enter the Gungeon is a twin-stick shooter filled with an absurd variety of guns and items. Players navigate through dungeon floors, each packed with challenges and loot. The game's humor shines through its gun-themed world. From bullet-shaped enemies to guns that shoot other guns, it's a whimsical take on the genre. This levity makes the challenging gameplay more approachable and enjoyable. Enter the Gungeon is not just fun, it's also deep, with layers of strategy hidden beneath its chaotic surface. The variety of weapons and synergies means there's always something new to try, keeping each run fresh and exciting. The follow-up to 20XX is here, bringing with it several upgrades to the iconic Mega Man X-like gameplay. Arguably the biggest change is the overhaul to the visuals, producing the SNES look that fans were clamoring for in the first game. 30XX takes the action and speed of Mega Man X and adds roguelike elements, such as procedurally generated levels, and enemies with randomized abilities to keep players on their toes. What's great about 30XX is that it can be played with a co-op partner throughout the entire adventure. To top it off, the two main characters, Ace and Nina, feature different movesets to provide players with two different ways to get through the game. The 30XX 1.1 update launched in December 2023, containing a number of balance tweaks and bug fixes. Every roguelike asks you to play the hand you're dealt as it deals out all manner of unpredictable upgrades to work with, but Slay the Spire's deck-building design takes that idiom much more literally than most. It's simply amazing how willing this game is to throw caution into the wind and let you completely upend its smartly constructed and orderly rules. If you happen into the right combination of character class, modifying relics, and powerful cards, all bets are off. The Defect, whose apparent strength is summonable orbs that automatically attack or defend every turn, can be transformed into a melee powerhouse with almost unlimited attacks, or the Ironclad Warrior can turn into a vampiric powerhouse who sacrifices his own health to do damage. More than that, the fundamentals can go out the window. This run you don't discard your hand at the end of a turn. Next time you can gain cards from any character's deck. Or maybe every card's casting cost is randomized. It's all over the place, and the one thing you can count on is not knowing for sure where your build will end up. Risk of Rain 2 transforms its predecessor's 2D platforming into a fully 3D world, offering a unique blend of shooting and character development. Each run features different biomes to explore and enemies to conquer, with a diverse array of items affecting gameplay in various ways. The game's distinct approach to loot and character classes makes each playthrough a new experience. Its blend of action, strategy, and procedural generation makes for a captivating and replayable game. This action roguelike uses pixel-based physics to create a treacherous landscape that reacts to the spells and magic you've created yourself. You can burn, melt, freeze, and evaporate the surroundings, manipulating and forming the terrain to continue on your journey, learning from your mistakes to get a little further each time. Prior to 2013, no one would have ever imagined that the roguelike genre would fit so snugly with a Metroidvania style of design, but then Rogue Legacy came along and flung the doors wide open by adding permanent progression that carried over from run to run, allowing players to supplement the skill that they gained through the experience of repeated runs, with stat upgrades, new pieces of gear, and new abilities that would make the dramatic difficulty spike of later biomes much more manageable. This proved to be quite groundbreaking, and would be something that many other games within the genre, several of which also wound up on this list, would also add to their games. Apart from being influential though, Rogue Legacy was also just a great game, with the aforementioned excellent progression, a fantastic blend of difficult bullet hellish combat with intense platforming challenges, and really clever procedural generation that made sure no two runs ever felt alike. Move through a maze of traps and path of destruction as you storm a castle in the sequel to one of the best roguelike games. Though Rogue Legacy 2 features everything you'd expect from a roguelike, with randomized runs and changing characters, the difference is that after every death, you spawn as your last playthrough as heir. Defined by your last run and your parents' inheritance, you become strong by building up the family manor and giving your children the best fighting chance. Wizard of Legend does something very good for a roguelike. It just lets you play. It's rather straightforward and more or less just lets you get on with it. You play a wizard trying to overcome the chaos trials in order to become the next Wizard of Legend. As such, you must travel through floors defeating enemies and the chance of defeating the final boss. It plays top-down and utilizes a variety of spells to make you feel like the badass wizard you always knew you could be. As well as some great timed spells, it features nice swift movement mechanics and some great enemy design that can be manipulated and fought around in interesting ways. As you understand each enemy more, your style will change and so will your wizard. Get in there and start casting. This game redefines narrative integration in roguelikes. Players control Zagreus, the son of Hades, on his quest to escape from the underworld. The game combines isometric hack-and-slash action with rich storytelling, each run adding to Zagreus' story. What sets Hades apart is its character development. The more you play, the more you uncover about Zagreus and his Olympian relatives. Each character is beautifully crafted, with their own backstories and motivations intertwining with the main narrative. Its name being a witty portmanteau of Streets of Rage and Rogue gives a surprisingly okay expression of what exactly Streets of Rogue gives you, the opportunity to punch bad guys whilst also giving you the freedom of a large top-down map. This being said, what makes Streets of Rogue so good is the way it blends so many systems together so efficiently. Like Noida above it, Streets of Rogue has a rather wonderful responsiveness to each action. You steal from a bin, maybe someone reports that insecurity becomes higher in the area, making your main mission a little harder. You decide to break a window to distract a guard, but it instead alarms everyone around, meaning you can't poison the air system. You are given a task and must complete it in any way you see fit, but the most genius thing about Streets of Rogue is that you have to live with those decisions. Each dumb decision makes you a little smarter, makes your situation a little harder, and your game much funner. At first glance, one might assume that the Binding of Isaac appears to be some sort of nightmarish, abominable take on the original Legend of Zelda's top-down dungeons. Which isn't wrong, that's pretty much exactly how the original game was conceived in 2011. But swap out Zelda's peppy elf protagonist and deliberately bespoke level design in favor of a deformed child making its way through endlessly harrowing and procedurally generated grotesque caverns, and you'll start to see how Isaac stands on its own. Isaac ultimately plays like a twin-stick shooter, just with dozens of passive and active power-ups to experiment with. It's gross, difficult, but insanely rewarding, pushing players to live, die, and repeat until they reach the finish. A decade since its release, The Binding of Isaac not only remains one of the most influential games in its genre, but also the greatest. Moonlighter does a very interesting thing. The main game is split up into two modes. One feels traditionally more like a roguelite with randomly generated dungeons and gear that is lost upon death. The other mode has you run a shop and sell the items you manage to salvage throughout your run. It throws you into a dungeon headfirst and hopes you find your way out, and then slows that right down as you talk to townsfolk, sell items for way too much, and just soak up the great music. You frantically hop around rooms fighting enemies that are too strong for you, and then the brevity of everyday life relaxes you like a massage at the end of a long day. It might not be quite as replayable as some of the other titles in this list due to its defined progression, but it by far one of the most playable. Darkest Dungeon is a gothic horror take on the roguelike genre. Players manage a team of heroes, exploring dark dungeons and battling formidable foes. The game's unique stress mechanic adds an extra layer of strategy, as heroes can succumb to mental afflictions. The game's art style and narrative elements create a dark and immersive atmosphere. Darkest Dungeon is as much about managing resources and psychological stresses as it is about dungeon crawling, making it a deeply strategic and engaging game. Darkest Dungeon is misery incarnate. Visually oppressive, brutally difficult, and bleak in the extreme, never has such a Moorish game made you feel quite so bad. It succeeds at holding you in a constant state of anxiety as you delve deeper into its dungeons in search of trinkets and gold. Setting out on a stagecoach through a perilous world, you encounter grim inhabitants and turn-based combat. You also have to consider that your party members aren't faultless meat shields. The physical and mental toll of your expeditions will inevitably take its toll on them, which gives Darkest Dungeon its bite. The very real nightmare of contracting a foul disease or seeing a friend wounded, or worse, can cause any adventurer to spiral toward an early grave. We generally avoid repeat series entries for roundups like this, but we'll make an exception for Risk of Rain Returns because it feels incredibly different from Risk of Rain 2, which came out in 2019 and can be found a little higher on this list. This is a fabulous remake of the original 2D side-scrolling action roguelike, and it feels even better than new. With more items, more playable characters, dramatically upgraded graphics, alternate skills that add a huge amount of replay value, and infinitely better co-op support, Risk of Rain Returns is really just Risk of Rain 1.5, modernized for a whole new audience after 10 years. Combining fast-paced action with Metroidvania elements, Dead Cells is a side-scrolling roguelike that thrives on player progression. Each run through the ever-changing castle unveils new paths and secrets, with a variety of ways to upgrade your abilities. The game's combat is exhilarating, offering a satisfying blend of risk and reward. As you delve deeper, you accumulate gear and skills, but one wrong move can end it all. This balance keeps the gameplay challenging and engaging. Children of Morta has a lot to love. From its implementation of roguelite staples to its wonderful sound design, it has so much innate charm that becomes obvious from the first few minutes. You are tasked with controlling and helping the Bergson family as they traverse multiple randomly generated dungeons in the depths of the caverns of Mount Morta. Each character can be upgraded and all of them have their own unique flair and style. This is what makes Children of Morta stand out. Characters have their own personality, encompassed with flaws and strengths, and the story is really great and surprisingly deep for a game of its caliber. Every inch of Children of Morta feels like it's trying to tell you a story, and it's a story worth being told. Don't Starve is a sharp, unnerving shot of gothic horror that delights in stressing you out and causing you pain. On a basic level, it's an isometric roguelike survival game where your task is to make a life for yourself in a world that so wants you dead. Developer Klein never seems to be short on new, and often unwelcome, surprises, and setting out to explore your surroundings is both a terrifying and alluring prospect. As cruel as its world can be, you'll be called back time and again to have another go, to unravel its complex systems, and to see what lurks just beyond. One of the more recent releases in this list, Neon Abyss, isn't necessarily groundbreaking, but it pulls off every element with ease. One part roguelite, one part platformer, and one part run and gun come together to make the cocktail that is Neon Abyss. With its futuristic-themed visuals and nightclub setting, it has more than enough to stand out. Not since The Binding of Isaac have I seen such an array of weird weapons, rooms, and ideas. One room might hold a secret new weapon where another contains a huge piano you must play in time to win. Sometimes, you side with chaos at a price, and sometimes your patience is rewarded. These tiny but long-lasting decisions come together to make each run strange, chaotic, and overall just very refreshing. Building on its predecessor's formula, Spelunky 2 takes players on a treacherous treasure hunt through procedurally generated caves. The sequel enhances everything from new environments to characters, ensuring a fresh experience for both new players and series veterans. The game is notorious for its difficulty, challenging players to navigate through traps and enemies while managing resources. Each run offers new discoveries, from hidden paths to unexpected interactions between the game's elements. Endless Dungeon is an entertaining, polished, and finely tuned roguelike. While the premise is simple enough, fighting to survive in luxuriously generated sci-fi spaces, there's a quality to the action that's difficult to ignore here. You're tasked with guiding a defenseless crystal robot between locked doors which, once opened, is where the chaos begins, hordes of monsters pushing against your defensive line, with little more than your twin-stick control to help you survive. Endless Dungeon is a fantastic roguelike that works fantastically in solo and co-op configurations. The follow-up to FTL from developer Subset Games doesn't fly quite as high up on this list as its predecessor, but Into the Breach is undoubtedly one of the most nuanced and strategic roguelikes around. Its particular flavor of time-traveling tactics combat plays out more like a careful game of chess than a hard-hitting warzone, only all the chess pieces are replaced by giant mechs fighting back a city-destroying kaiju threat. Each encounter could only be a handful of turns long, but the amount of choice you have during those turns is staggering. Enemies are satisfyingly consistent and dastardly destructive at the same time, forcing you to plan moves far into the future in order to address both what they're doing now and what they could do down the line. Learning that depth from run to run can be incredibly rewarding, especially as you start to realize when sacrificing a rocket-wielding pawn might hurt in the short term but be better in the long run. Into the Breach is a strategy roguelike packed with hard choices, but it's also one that still lets you taste the sweet reward of making them right. So, did you like the games I recommended? So leave your like, subscribe to the channel to follow me and activate the bell because I post a lot of videos on this channel and you can't miss it. I would like to remind you that in the description we have a list of different products that can make your gaming experience much better. If you want to buy, the link will be in the description. Anyway, thank you very much for following me this far and until next time, bye.